And one thing I think that happened was I had this friend at work that I was really good friends with, and he was a very devout evangelical guy.
Okay.
And I eventually, he'd kind of witnessed to me a few times before. It didn't go anywhere, but I was always friendly with him.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought I would tell him that I was starting to go to these classes at the Catholic Church, learning about, Christianity and Catholicism, and thought he would be happy that I was doing that. And he actually was like shocked. Like
he wasn't so happy.
He wasn't so happy.
Okay.
And so he started witnessing to me about some of the fallacies of the Catholic Church as far as what he saw.
Yeah.
So he would start telling me, the things. He was sola scriptura, Bible alone, faith alone, and he started, teaching me these Protestant doctrines, then saying that the Catholic Church didn't believe these things. So. So then I took that and went and started talking to Father Paul about some of these things my Protestant friend was telling me. And the biggest one was like that I went to Father Paul with was he was telling me that the Catholic Church teaches that you're saved through your works and not by faith. That's the classic.
Yeah.
And so I went to Father Paul and asked him like, my Protestant friend said I shouldn't become Catholic because he says you guys teach that we're saved by works and not by faith.
Yeah.
And he explained to me how that wasn't true. But then it triggered him to think of giving me a Scott Hahn tape. So so he gave me that was back in the day when they still had cassette tapes.
Oh, there you go.
And for some reason he had the Scott Hahn conversion story on tape.
Wow.
The one that's famous.
The one that's famous,
yes.
Famous.
I had never heard of Scott Hahn, didn't know who he was.
Yeah.
And
well, that's a good first step to become
Catholic. Good first step, yeah. So I listened to that tape, and he's a former Protestant pastor, and he talks about his former belief system, where it was Bible alone, faith alone, and then how he came to change his perspective on that and believe the Catholic Church was the true Church of Christ and the most biblical church. He's all about the Bible.
Yeah.
And so that was an amazing story that kind of helped me. But then the part in that tape that helped me the most was at the end of his talk. It was like a question and answer session, and someone asked Scott Hahn like, what are some of the top books that you read to help you become Catholic? And so he listed off about half a dozen books that he said had the biggest impact on him becoming Catholic. And I'm like, oh, wow. So I'll order those books. So I got on Amazon and ordered those books.
Wow.
And then I started reading them. So like I started like really becoming, I don't know if obsessed the right word, but I'm like, okay, this is getting really interesting.
It's really intriguing you.
This is really like, okay, this isn't stupid anymore.
And these books are like Protestant Christian apologetic, like Catholic Protestant, or are they books like mostly like theism in general?
No, there's a mix, and it was a perfect mix. It's like God had to have designed these books for me. I mean, like that came on this tape. I mean, there was Catholic authors like Frank Sheed.
Yeah. Sure,
Theology for Beginners.
I'm looking at it right now.
That was a huge
right
one. I mean, one of the ones
cool.
that was not Catholic that had a huge impact was C.S. Lewis, Mere Christianity.
Yeah.
That had a really big impact on me because he was a former atheist.
Yes.
And that book's not written.
Oh, that's cool.
Like he's a layman, so he explained his belief in very logical, clear. And he answered the question of good and evil. Like that was one of the big questions I'd had.
Yeah.
There was other ones as well that had to do with the church fathers and things like that, but it was a perfect list of books for me to read.
Okay. So you start reading these books then, you listen to Dr. Scott Hahn, and you're also, you're now also kind of evaluating Christianity in general, seeing a reasonable belief to, a reasonableness just to faith in Christianity, but also, do you become Protestant first? Are you?
No.
Okay.
The big book that I'd read at that time that I'd never read before was the New Testament. I had never read the Bible before growing up. I mean, we had a King James Bible in our house, but I'd never opened it once. And so I read the New Testament during this time when I'm, talking to my friend, I'm going to these classes. I have these Catholic books now, and I read the New Testament for the first time. And, it's not that big. It's actually not that big of a book.
Yeah.
So I kind of had this Catholic stuff that I was learning, and then I had this Protestant guy telling me this stuff, and I read through the Bible for the first time,
right?
Kind of knowing what some of the controversial
But you're not
issues
landing
were.
anywhere yet. You're
No,
just reading
not
it
yet.
kind
But
of-
when
yeah.
I read it, what I noticed was like the most straightforward reading of the text was usually the Catholic position,
Wow.
which was surprising.
Yeah.
Because the only one thing I knew about the Catholic Church, and I think most people who grew up in a Protestant tradition have heard, is like it's the one church that doesn't believe in the Bible. Like that's the only thing I knew was that's the church you don't want to go to
Right.
because it's the one that doesn't believe in the Bible.
Right.
That's what that was in my mind.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Right.
And then so now I'm like reading the Bible, I'm hearing both sides of the story.
Right.
And when I read the Bible, it seems like the Catholic position is actually the most straightforward
Makes the most sense.
interpretation. Like
That is so cool, Scott. That is such a cool story, a cool insight of your life to kind of just read it straight through and come to at least to the conclusion that seemed like the Catholic understanding, the Catholic view of the Bible actually made sense of the Bible the most as a whole, and particularly the New Testament. Because, I mean, I came to the same conclusion, but I also was raised in a Catholic home.
Right.
And so, of course, we have our own biases and prejudices, is that, and we all do, of course, and we can do the best we can to recognize them and still just make the best conclusion with the evidence that we have available to us. Of course, we all have to combat that. But for me, I mean, it was, that being said, for me, also meeting my wife, who was a Protestant at the time,
Right.
the first place that I started reading and looking for answers was Scripture. And I, too, felt like a straightforward reading of the text, of both Old and New, seemed to point to Catholicism. But, of course, I grew up Catholic, so I have, in some ways, even though I wasn't fully on board, in some ways I kind of have that background.
Right.
So it's really interesting to me to hear you, someone who's been an atheist for many years and is evaluating these different kind of Christian camps, reading the New Testament, to come to the conclusion that, you know what, if I'm reading this straightforward, if it's between maybe some of these different camps, Catholicism kind of is making the most sense out of this text.
And it's the most biblical. Like I said, the only thing that I knew about the Catholic Church was it was against the Bible.
Right.
Which then you read the Bible and you hear what they believe. It's like, actually, it's not against the Bible.
Yeah.
Right.
That's awesome.
And then